Hi crafty friends, it's Donna here from Donna is Playing Paper, and I have a set of 5 cards for you today that use this Abstract Coverplate die as the main focus. We'll start with a quick and easy way to use the die for a simple card, then some 2-for-1 cards, followed by a card with a window front, and finally a super quick and simple bonus card. Let me introduce the hero of the day. It's this Abstract Coverplate die. This is a great all-purpose die that you can use for anything from grunge to florals to bright geometrics. Here's what I did with it. First of all, let's use the die in its quickest, simplest form. I've got a piece of white cardstock, centered the die on it, and cut that out. And then I'm just going to layer that over some colored paper. I'm using one of the B-sides from this Floral Bliss paper pack. I have an enormous sheet, but I'll link to the smaller 6x6 papers. That size is plenty for cards like this. I've used the largest nested pierced rectangle die to cut this to the size of my card, but you could just cut that with a trimmer. In this case, I'm using a US sized 4¼ by 5½ inch card because that's what works out to have a nice even border on this die. By simply gluing that white cover plate down onto the background paper, we have a card. I'm going to add a congratulations sentiment because I need quite a few congratulations cards at the moment. I'm using the fine script layered congratulations die, and I'm only going to use the words, not the background. And I have cut 3 of those from blue paper, to which I've added a layer of double-sided adhesive. The one I've used today is from Pink and Main, and I like this one because it is removable initially, so I have a little bit of wiggle time. These fine dies are so delicate, and I find it really easy to pull them out of shape. And so I'm doing my layering with the top layer still sitting in the die. That way, by the time I remove it, I have something that's a little bit more sturdy. Then it's simply a matter of peeling off the backing paper and sticking it to the card, and the design of the cover die helps me to line that up straight. You could leave it as it is, or add some extra dots, as I've done here. Next, let's look at how we can stretch this die by getting 2 cards from 1 cut. First of all, I want to make some fabulous paper. Isn't that music fun? Next, I'm going to use a piece of press and seal to hold everything together while I take it out of the die. If you can't get a hold of press and seal, you could potentially use post-it tape for this part of the process. I've poked down through all of those little windows, and I'm using a tool to help me carefully peel back the die. Then I'm going to fold that press and seal over like a sandwich so that it's now holding the front of the paper, not the back. Next, 1 million small pieces of foam tape. I've peeled back the press and seal on 2 corners so that I can line those 2 corners up very neatly with the corners of my card, and then I'm carefully pressing down all of the little windows and peeling back the negative layer. found a way to cut double-sided tape that doesn't stick to my scissors. The scissors I have here are non-stick, but when I'm cutting thin strips, it's still a problem. But by putting the backing paper from some of those earlier pieces that I cut behind my piece of tape, I can cut super thin strips with nothing sticking at all. I'm going to show you how I do this on a larger scale towards the end of this video. Now for some sentiments. Because these are cut from paper with a white core, I'm going to use a black pen just to draw around to the outside so that you can't see that, and even looking from the side, they look really professional. Now, onto that card with the window front. I'm going to use the die to cut from a whole card this time, and I'm using a top folding card base. I'm also going to cut the same die from exactly the same place on an extra piece of paper. This will make the front a little bit more sturdy so that it will stand up even with the holes cut out of it. I lined those papers up and ran them through my die together, and then I glued the extra sheet of paper to the front, lining up the holes neatly. Now we have our sturdy card base. Next, I'm going to add some flowers. These are called etched flowers. There's a small and a large flower in the pack, and each flower is stuck together as one die, and you get some front petals and back petals and a centerpiece. I'm trialing Picket Studios' new pouncing tool, which I've recently purchased, and I'm really liking them for being able to add colour to things which I've already die cut. Because instead of wiping them across the surface, you just sort of jump up and down on the surface. It's really interesting because you do get a slightly different look. You get a lot of small dots rather than a swipe of the ink with each dab. So for those of you who are into pointillism, these are perfect. It certainly was a lot of fun to line up all the centres and get them all with one great dab. I've used the same 3 colours of distress ink that I used for my last 2 cards, using them either individually or blending them to make the flowers. And I'm going to use 1 large and 2 small flowers on the front of this card. I'm just putting a little dab of glue on the front of the card and lightly holding them in place. I'm then going to stick my next 3 flowers onto the back because I'd like it to look good from both sides. This time I'm using a lot of glue and sticking the petals at the front to the petals at the back, so everything is really secure. From the front you can see extra petals, and also from the back. I quite like that look. To me they just look like extra white petals in the background. But if this worries you, you could choose a flower or an image that's symmetrical. Because the front of this card is completely see-through, there's nowhere to write. And so I'm making an insert for this card. I have some paper here, which is fairly thin, but not thin enough to see through. I've cut that and folded it in half so that I have an insert that's very slightly smaller than the size of my card all the way around, but still big enough that you can't see the edges of it when you close the card. I'm going to add a sentiment from the All Occasions sentiment sheets, and this card is done. I have to say, this is my favourite from today's cards. But you may have noticed that when I pulled the white pieces out of this card, I saved them, and I thought I'd make a super quick and easy card just to use them up. Once again, I've used the same 3 colours of ink, and I've used the edge of the ink pad to swipe onto my card diagonally. Here's that trick for cutting thin strips of tape again. This time I've used silicone paper from my kitchen, and by putting a long strip of foam tape on that, I can cut all the thin, small pieces I need. That's all for today's cards. I hope that you've enjoyed them, that you've enjoyed that music composed by my son Darcy, and that you're having a fantastic day. Until next time, stay crafty. Bye for now.